I have learned something about the human mind, mine in particular, that I am not proud of. When it is frightened and starved for an explanation, it will build one out of whatever scraps are lying around, and then it will defend that explanation like its life depends on it, even when the truth is standing right there in plainer clothes. I built an entire affair for my husband, every brick of it, and I was so certain of my construction that I nearly took a wrecking ball to a 16-year marriage over a betrayal that existed nowhere except inside my own terrified head. My name is Shannon. I am 39 years old, and I am a high school guidance counselor in Franklin, Tennessee, just south of Nashville. It is a comfortable, pretty town, the kind of place people move to so their kids can go to the good schools, and my whole job is sitting across from frightened teenagers and helping them see that the catastrophe they are certain is coming usually isn't, that they have leapt to the worst conclusion on thin evidence. I am, professionally, an expert in talking people down from the worst-case story. Keep that in mind. It is the bitterest part of this whole thing. My husband is Kevin. We have been married 16 years, together since college, and we have 2 kids, 12 and 9. Kevin was, for all of our marriage, the provider in the old-fashioned sense. He had a good job, a director's job at a logistics company, the kind with a title and a parking spot, and a salary that let us have the nice house in the good school district and the 2 cars and the appearance, the smooth, comfortable appearance, of a family that had it all figured out. I want to be honest about that appearance because it matters to everything that happened. We had built a life that looked a certain way, and a great deal of our identity, his especially, was wrapped up in maintaining that look. Kevin was a good husband. I want to say that plainly before any of the rest, because it matters to why I should have known better. 16 years, and he had never given me a real reason to doubt him. He was a present father, the kind who coached the 9-year-old soccer and kept track of the 12-year-old's friend drama, a man who still reached for my hand in the car. But he was also, and I see this so clearly now, a man who had quietly organized his entire sense of worth around being the provider. His own father had been one of those steady, stoic, never-complain men who measured themselves by the roof over the family's head, and Kevin had inherited every bit of that, the pride and the silence both. He did not talk about feelings. He handled things. When something was wrong, his instinct was never to share the weight, but to carry it out of sight until he had fixed it. For 16 years, that had mostly looked like strength, and I had loved him for it, and I never once stopped to think about what that same trait would do to him, and to us, on the day he hit something he could not fix and could not bear to admit. I had married a man who would rather break in private than worry me in public. I just did not know it yet. It started in the late winter. Kevin changed. It was subtle at first, the way these things are. He got quieter, more closed. He started sleeping badly, and I'd wake at 3 and find his side of the bed empty and him sitting in the dark downstairs. He became guarded with his phone in a way he never had been, turning it face down, taking calls in the garage, a new password I noticed but didn't have. He seemed to be carrying something heavy and would not tell me what, and when I asked if something was wrong, he'd put on a smile that did not reach his eyes and say he was just tired, just stressed at work, big project. And then there was the money. I'm the one who handles our finances, and I started noticing things that didn't add up. Our savings creeping down, small withdrawals, a tightness where there had always been ease, and Kevin getting strange and defensive whenever I brought up the accounts, which he had never been before. What I did with all of it, watching him change that spring, was the most natural and most dangerous thing in the world. I started to take it personally. When a husband goes quiet and secretive, a wife's mind does not first think he is suffering, it thinks he is hiding, and the next thought, fast on its heels, is he is hiding something from me, and the thought after that, almost instant, is the worst one. I lay awake next to his empty side of the bed, and I did not think my husband is in pain. I thought my husband is pulling away from me, and I began, without quite deciding to watch him, to notice the face-down phone, to clock the garage calls, to read meaning into the set of his shoulders. And here is the thing about watching someone through the lens of a suspicion. Every single thing they do becomes evidence for it. A man carrying a terrible secret and a man hiding an affair look, from the outside, almost exactly alike. The same evasions, the same distance, the same guilt sitting in the eyes. I was seeing real guilt on his face. I just assigned it to the wrong crime. And then I found the two things that, in my mind, sealed it. The first was a hotel receipt in his jacket pocket when I went to take it to the cleaners. A hotel, here in town, a Tuesday afternoon, 2 months earlier. We do not stay in hotels in our own town. There is exactly one reason, my fear told me instantly, that a married man pays for a hotel room in his own city on a weekday afternoon. And the second, which I went looking for after the receipt because now I was hunting, was a number in his phone. I'd watched him put in the password enough times by then to have it. A woman's name I didn't recognize, Donna, with a string of texts and several calls, including calls on weekends, on Sunday. Who calls a married man on a Sunday afternoon? I didn't read the text closely. I didn't need to, I told myself. I had the receipt. I had the woman. I had the secrecy and the lying and the money draining out of our savings, which I now understood, of course, was him spending on her. The picture assembled itself in about 4 seconds, and it was airtight. My husband was having an affair with a woman named Donna. He was spending our savings on her, lying to my face, sneaking calls in the garage, taking her to hotels in our own town on Tuesday afternoons. I was sure. I have never in my life been more sure of anything. I did not confront him right away, and I want to tell you why, because it is the part that shames me most. I wanted to catch him. The counselor in me, the careful woman who helps teenagers gather facts before they panic, went completely out the window, and something colder took over. I wanted proof I could throw down in front of him so he couldn't wriggle out of it. I told my sister everything, and she was furious on my behalf, and the two of us spent a long phone call cataloging every sign, every brick, building the case higher, and there is a terrible momentum to that, to two angry women assembling a betrayal. Every new detail snaps into place, every old memory gets recolored, and the story becomes so complete and so satisfying in its awfulness that the truth, if it tried to speak, could not get a word in. By the end of 2 weeks, I had stopped wondering whether he was cheating. I was planning what I'd do when I proved it. I had, in my mind, already started leaving. I think about those 2 weeks of case building more than almost anything, because that is where I went truly wrong. Not in the first suspicion, which was human, but in what I did with it. I did not investigate. I prosecuted. There is an enormous difference, and I, of all people, should have known it, because I spend my working life teaching kids the difference between gathering facts and confirming fears. An investigator asks, what else could this mean? A prosecutor asks, how does this prove what I already believe? I became a prosecutor in my own marriage. Every memory got recolored. The work trip last year, suddenly suspect. A late night back in March, suddenly damning. My sister, who loves me and was furious for me, became my co-counsel, and the two of us on the phone built a case so tall and so satisfying that the truth would have needed a megaphone to be heard over it. That is what fear does when it teams up with company. It does not seek the answer. It builds the most dramatic possible version of the question, and then it falls in love with it. So, one Tuesday, a Tuesday because that was the hotel day, and in my mind, he had a standing Tuesday arrangement. I decided to catch him. I would go to his office, unannounced, at lunch, and I would see for myself whatever there was to see. And if he wasn't there, if he'd slipped off to his hotel, I would know. I drove to his company's building downtown, the building I had been to at Christmas parties, my heart slamming, rehearsing the cold, calm voice I'd use. I walked into the lobby. I went to the reception desk, and I said I was Kevin's wife, and I was here to surprise him for lunch. Was he in? And the young woman at the desk got a careful, confused look on her face, the look of someone who realizes they are about to be the one to deliver news they were not supposed to deliver. And she said, as gently as she could, "Ma'am, Kevin hasn't worked here since January." I want you to understand that the floor did not just drop. It is more accurate to say the floor I had been standing on turned out to have never been there. Every single brick of my airtight case was still in my hand, but the building they made was suddenly a completely different building, and I did not yet know what it was. only that it was not the one I had constructed, and that I had been about to burn down my marriage standing inside the wrong one. I sat in my car in that parking lot for a long time, holding the hotel receipt, the pieces violently rearranging themselves. 5 months. He had been laid off, or fired, or something in January. It was now June, and for 5 months my husband had been getting up every single morning, putting on his suit, kissing me goodbye, and driving away to a job that no longer existed. The dressing up, the leaving, the 3 a.m. dread, the closed-off silence, the draining savings. Not an affair. Not Donna in a hotel. Something else. Something I did not yet understand, but that was already, even in my shock, breaking my heart in an entirely new direction. I called the recruiter's number, sitting there in that parking lot. I do not know what I expected. Some final confirmation, I suppose. The last brick of a building that had already collapsed. A woman answered, brisk and professional, and when I stammered out who I was, her voice softened with a recognition that told me she knew far more about my family situation than I did, and she said, carefully, that she had been working with Kevin since February to find him a new placement, that he was a wonderful candidate, that the market had just been brutal this year. She thought I knew. Of course she thought I knew. What kind of man hides his own unemployment from his own wife? And I sat there with the phone in my lap and understood that a stranger, a headhunter I had cast as my husband's mistress, had been the only person on earth my husband had let see his fear for 5 months. He could tell her because she was outside the marriage, outside the appearance. He could not tell me the person it actually belonged to. That, more than anything, is what broke my heart in that parking lot. I did not confront him with rage that night. The rage had drained out of me in that parking lot and left something much heavier behind. I waited until the kids were in bed, and I sat him down, and I did not accuse him of anything. I just said, quietly, "I went to your office today." And I watched my husband's face collapse. Not the face of a man caught cheating, but the face of a man whose last, exhausting, 5-month-long performance has finally, mercifully, ended. And he put his head in his hands, and the whole thing came out. He had been laid off in January, in a round of cuts, with no warning. And he had been so ashamed, so completely unmanned by it in his own words, that he could not bring himself to tell me. His whole sense of himself was that job, that provider role, that smooth appearance, and the thought of coming home and saying, "I lost it, I failed, we're in trouble," felt, to him, like ceasing to exist. So, he didn't. He decided he'd just find another job, fast, quietly, before I ever had to know, and keep everything looking normal in the meantime. And then, fast became weeks, and weeks became months, and the lie got too big to walk back, exactly the way these things do. Donna was a recruiter, a headhunter helping him job hunt, which is why she called on weekends, why he hid it. The hotel receipt was a job fair, a hiring event in a hotel conference room. The draining savings were him quietly paying our mortgage and our bills out of our cushion, month after month, so the kids and I would never feel a thing, while he drove to coffee shops and the public library every day in a suit, and applied for jobs and got rejected and told no one, and carried the entire crushing weight of it completely alone for 5 months, rather than let me see him as anything less than the man he thought I'd married. He told me things, that night, that I will not forget. He told me about the mornings, how he would drive out of our neighborhood in his suit and then just sit in the car somewhere, a library lot, a coffee shop, and feel the hours stretch out empty in front of him, a man with nowhere to be and a family that thought he was out building their future. He told me he had almost confessed 100 times, and that every day he did not made the next day's confession bigger, until it felt impossible, until the only thing more terrifying than the lie was the size of admitting it. He told me he had lain awake doing the savings math, calculating exactly how many more months he could keep the bills paid and the secret intact, and that the number getting smaller was the thing that woke him at 3 in the morning. Not another woman, just arithmetic, just the slow draining of the cushion he was using to protect us from a truth he could not bring himself to say. I had imagined him in a hotel with Donna. He had been in a parking lot alone, doing subtraction, terrified every single day while I built my case. I have to sit with the hard parts of this, both of them, because there are two, and they belong to two different people. His part is real, and it nearly cost us everything, and I have had to be honest with him about it, even in my compassion. What he did was a profound deception. For 5 months, he looked me in the eye every morning and lied, and he made enormous decisions about our family's future, draining the savings I was responsible for, alone, in secret, without ever giving me a vote, because his shame decided that my knowing was worse than my being kept in the dark. He treated me as someone to be protected from the truth, rather than as a partner to face it with, and that is its own kind of betrayal, even though there was no other woman in it. I told him, I would have weathered the job loss with you in a heartbeat. What I can barely weather is that you didn't think I could. But my part is the one I will carry, because I took a frightened, struggling, drowning man, and on a handful of ambiguous clues, I convicted him, in my own heart, of the worst thing I could imagine. I never once, in 2 weeks of case building, considered a gentler explanation. I, a professional who talks teenagers out of catastrophic thinking for a living, leapt straight to betrayal, and then went looking only for evidence that confirmed it. I was so busy building my affair that I never asked the question that would have cracked the whole thing open in an evening. The question a loving wife asks before a suspicious one does. Honey, what is actually going on with you, because I can see you're drowning? I had a husband sending up every distress flare a person can send, and I read every one of them as guilt instead of pain. I almost left a man at the very moment he most needed me to stay. What haunts me is how close the two explanations sat to each other and how completely I chose the wrong one. The distance was real, the secrecy was real, the lying was real, the draining savings were real. I did not imagine a single one of my clues. That is the trap of it. I was not paranoid. The evidence existed. I just took a pile of true facts and built the wrong house out of them, the dramatic house, the betrayal house, instead of the quieter, sadder, far more likely one. And I think now that I reached for the affair because in some terrible way it was easier. An affair would have made Kevin the villain and me the wronged innocent, a clean story with a clear shape, whereas the truth required me to see my husband as a frightened, failing, fully human man, and to ask what part our whole shiny life had played in making him too ashamed to come home and tell me. Betrayal would have let me leave with my head held high. The truth asked me to stay and look at hard things, including myself. I am not entirely sure which one I would have found easier if the receptionist had not said what she said. We are okay now, which I do not say lightly. It has been the hardest year of our marriage, and not because of the money, though the money was hard. We sold the big house. We are in a smaller one now, in a different school district that is just fine, and it turns out the appearance we nearly destroyed ourselves to maintain was the least valuable thing we owned. The hard part was rebuilding the honesty. We are both in counseling, the irony of which is not lost on me. Kevin is learning that I did not marry a job title and that my love does not have conditions he has to keep earning. And I am learning to ask before I assume, to stay curious longer than I stay afraid, to remember that the person across from me is far more likely to be struggling than scheming. We are closer now than we were before January because there are no more performances between us. But we got there by the narrowest margin, and I think about that margin all the time. If you have ever built a case against someone you love out of fear and thin evidence, if you have ever felt the cold satisfaction of a terrible story snapping into place, then this story is for you. One word in the comments, if it found you. Worst. Just that. It is for everyone who assumed the worst about someone who was actually just drowning, and for the narrow, lucky margin by which some of us find out before it's too late. Subscribe for new stories, real patterns, full narratives, the long game. 2 small pieces of wisdom from this one before I go. The first, when someone you love starts acting strange, secretive, distant, off, your frightened mind will reach for the most dramatic explanation it can find, because a clear villain is somehow easier to bear than an unclear ache. Resist it. The same set of clues, the secrecy, the distance, the lying, the money, fits betrayal, yes, but it fits a dozen quieter and more common things just as well. Shame, fear, depression, illness, debt, a person silently coming apart. Before you assemble the worst story and start defending it, ask the open question first. Not the accusation, the question. What is really going on with you? Say it with love and then actually listen, because you may be looking at the evidence of a drowning and mistaking it for the evidence of a crime, and those require opposite responses from you. The second, and this one is for the Kevins because there are so many of you. Your shame is lying to you about what the people who love you can handle. You think that if they see you fail, lose the job, lose the money, lose the role you thought you had to play, they will love you less, and so you hide it. And the hiding does what no failure ever could. It builds a wall of secrets that looks, from the other side, exactly like betrayal. The people who love you did not sign up for the performance. They signed up for you. Letting them see you struggle is not the thing that loses their respect. Hiding from them is. Whatever you are carrying alone right now because you are too ashamed to set it down in front of them, set it down. The truth, even the humiliating truth, is almost always lighter than the lie you're building to cover it. Before you accuse someone of the worst thing, make sure the evidence is for that crime and not just for a person drowning in silence. The truth is often sadder than betrayal and far more worth saving. I'll see you next time.